As I mentioned at the top of the program, Anthony Albanese is preparing to meet with China's President Xi Jinping in just a couple of hours. It'll be the first time Xi has met with an Australian Prime Minister in 6 years. But it was Joe Biden's turn last night, with the pair discussing trade, human rights and Taiwan during a marathon 3-hour meeting. Here's the US President speaking after the meeting.
I absolutely believe there need not be a new Cold War. I've met many times with Xi Jinping, and we were candid and clear with one another across the board. And I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. And I made it clear that our policy on Taiwan has not changed at all.
Let me bring in John Decker, Grey Television's White House correspondent, who joins us live from Bali. Good to talk to you again, John. It's a pretty important moment whenever the leaders of the two remaining superpowers speak face to face. What is the readout from the White House on this meeting?
The readout from the White House was, first of all, don't expect much in terms of deliverables from this meeting. But he said that the point of the meeting is to lower tensions, to lower the temperature as it relates to what we've seen over the past few years. And that is a very bad relationship between the U.S. and China. That is goes back to even the Trump years, when Trump, of course, imposed those very stiff trade tariffs on the Chinese government. They remain in place, Chris, during the Biden administration, and there's no talk in terms of lowering those trade tariffs or eliminating them anytime in the near future.
Now, the way I read the statements from both leaders on Taiwan is effectively neither side changes its position. So there's been a lot of toing and froing over the past couple of years, but essentially the status quo remains the case in Taiwan. And that's really what we all want, right? That's what President Biden wants. He just doesn't want China to change anything when it comes to Taiwan.
Well, that's all true, Chris, but also keep in mind, President Biden 4 times has said that the U.S. would come to the defense of Taiwan if it is attacked by China. 4 times he said that. 4 times the White House has walked back that statement. And what I heard from President Biden yesterday at the press conference that he had after his 3.5-hour meeting with President Xi is that the so-called one China policy, which has been in effect for generations of American presidents, still remains in effect today. So I agree with you. It is the status quo, but sometimes President Biden goes away from the status quo in answering that particular question as to whether or not the U.S. would come to the defense of Taiwan if China invades that country.
Yeah, he's abandoned that strategic ambiguity 4 times, as you say. Just briefly, John, on Ukraine, is there any readout on whether President Biden was able to put any pressure on Xi Jinping to pressure Russia over Ukraine?
Well, it's not the first time that President Biden has spoken to President Xi. This is the first time, as you know, in person. And what China has told President Biden is that essentially they will remain on the sidelines. As you know, President Xi has, in his own way, chided Russia for their prosecution of the war. And they promised the U.S., they promised, in addition, our allies, that it will not provide any type of military equipment to Russia as Russia prosecutes their war against Ukraine.
Thanks so much for joining us again, John.
Thank you, Chris.
John Decker there, following the US President to the G20 in Bali.